Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If Guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei became Harem God. Now before starting, please give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. This is Haruka. Hayatu was not a generally happy woman. 3 times. That was how many times she had tried and failed. That was the number of times that she and her husband had their hopes and dreams raised and elevated, and then promptly squashed, crashing like an egg placed in the hands of a hyperactive infant. Despite how much her husband claimed that it was not her fault, and how his calm, understanding gazes had assured her that he would love her unconditionally, even if she never got a child, there was a part of her that felt inadequate. She had felt broken, toyed with. She perceived her status as a woman to have been lessened by her inability to successfully bring and retain life into the world. They had momentarily considered adoption, yet she knew, deep within her, no matter how much of a bad person it made her feel, that she would not be able to love an adopted child in the same manner she would her own flesh and blood. She would not be able to stare into the child's eyes without being reminded of her harsh failures at her own childbearing attempts. So, she had tried once more, and then she had succeeded. The nurses of Harem Central Hospital would go on to claim that they had never met parents who had cried so much upon finally having a child. They had never seen a pair who had so completely and honestly displayed their joy, their sorrows, their grief, their passion, and their love. As such, Haruka had seen it fitting to name her son after that moment. His name will be Issei, to mean, honestly. As such, the child had grown, and Haruka would not deny that she and her husband had spoiled their son to no small amount. They let him have most of what he wanted, most of what he needed. They read to him bedtime stories, bought him the best clothes and toys that they could afford, and with the 3 of them, their life was absolutely complete. Haruka loved her son. She loved him more than anything else, more than anyone else, and strange as it was, she loved her son even more than she loved her own husband. The bond between mother and child was such that was inexplicable. It was something great and pure, and she ensured that she would see her child grow up to become the very best person that he could be. She had lost 3 prior children, 3 prior lives that would have been grown to be kind-hearted doctors or surgeons, or to be brilliant scientific minds, or to go on and become great, fantastic novelists and writers. As such, Haruka had decided that she wanted her child, her first and only son, to be the very best individual he could be. She wouldn't force him down any path. Oh heavens no, she loved him far too much for that to happen. Rather, she slowly began to cultivate different talents within him. Getting him a mini painter's kit, a small children's science lab, a collection of entertaining child books about anatomy and science and history. She wanted her little boy to be anything he wanted to be. However, nothing had prepared her for the words he would declare to her one day when asked that ever-curious question. I want to be a harem king. She had stared, baffled, eyes blinking at the sheer ludicrousness of the statement, despite the fact that her son had seemed so resolute and determined when making the declaration. Her lips had crinkled into a small, slightly uncomfortable smile as she had heard his words. It was ridiculous, she had thought. It was an unrealistic, unattainable goal, and one which was extremely inappropriate for a child to have. It could even be considered as a somewhat chauvinistic male fantasy, to attain a collection of women in which to use and exchange as easily as removing a pair of briefs from the bottom drawer of a closet. Of course, she knew that he got this from her husband. Her husband had once possessed such a dream during his more youthful, exuberant years, but she never imagined that her son would have something like that implanted into his mind. Still, she hadn't utterly dismissed the idea, nor had she immediately made clear her disapproval, because Haruka Hayatu was a smart woman, and she knew that telling someone they couldn't do something would only make them want to do it out of spite or childish vehemence. So instead, she kindly, softly, and as gently as she could, uttered 3 simple words. And then what? She had then watched as he deflated like a popped balloon at a kindergarten birthday party. Huh, she smiled. What will you do after you become a harem king, Issei-chan? The energetic brown-haired child had perked up. Then I'll get to fondle all the breasts I want. Her eye had twitched slightly at the statement, but she was not deterred as she asked again. And then what? He blinked for a moment. What do you mean, Ka-chan? Let's say you eventually become a harem king and you get to fondle all the breasts you want. What will you do then when you get tired of fondling breasts? He rose his nose up in disbelief and distaste. I'll never get tired of breasts. Haruka had not rebuked him then. Instead, she had taken a more practical approach. For the next 2 weeks, all he ate was his favorite food, the food he loved immensely, the one in which he would often claim was all he would eat if given the chance. The 2 weeks were barely up when he had turned green at the sight of the meal when it was placed in front of his face. He was a child, young and impressionable, but it was not hard for even him to connect the dots. If, in less than 2 weeks, he had grown sick of the one thing he loved to eat much more than anything else, what were the odds that he would never get tired of breasts? It could take a month, or it could take a year, but there would reach a point in which he would grow tired of it. And then what? What would happen then? What would become of his dream? What would become of him? These were rather heavy questions for a child, rather hefty ones to ask of someone so young. But Haruka was a woman who would not allow her one and only child waste his life by chasing after some unrealistic, unattainable fantasy of becoming a harem king. Tell you what, Issei-chan, I won't tell you not to chase your Dream of becoming a harem king, but before you do, why not try to become something like a doctor, or maybe even a lawyer, or, I know, an astronaut. You could get to fly out and explore space and stars Issei-kun, maybe even meet some tiny green men. Really? Are there little tiny green men out there, Ka-chan? She pinched his cheek softly and placed her nose on his, rubbing their noses together in a manner that made him laugh. That's for you to go out there and find out, my little Issei-chan. Go out there and do something, anything that fulfills you, so whenever you ask yourself and then what, you will always have the answer. Soon after that, a young boy's budding obsession with breasts and the womanly form were slowly substituted by an obsession with the sciences, chemistry, and physics. A growing fascination for girls was slowly switched by an immense fascination for philosophy, music, and the arts. She knew that there was a part of him that still possessed those slightly perverted tendencies, but the part was minor enough to be considered just a level or two beyond normal juvenile fantasies, instead of delusions of grandeur. Thus, the words harem king were never heard in the Hayado household ever again. Haruka had felt satisfied that she had sent her son down the right path. She had felt happier knowing that he had a much brighter future ahead of him. Then, when the Strata report cards began piling up on the refrigerator as teachers called her to heap high praise on the intellectual prowess of her little boy, she had glowed absolutely with pride. Yet, as she watched as little Issei began to spend less and less time around his peers, and more time in his room studying, and as his moments at the family table grew scarce as the library had slowly become his second home, and she watched as her son's closest friend, Irina, had become an infrequent face as their different interests drifted them apart, she couldn't help but feel that she had made a horrible mistake. You know, dear, this still feels all too surreal. Haruka Hayado could only nod, slightly, a small smile gracing her lips as her husband sat beside her, and as her hands went out to his, grasping the drink in his hand. Iced tea, he hummed, just as you like it, dear. She collected the drink, feeling the cold plastic send shivers down her hand. As the object was wet with precipitation, cold droplets of water stained the outside, as did tiny, near inconspicuous wisps of vapor. Too cold, she gave a grimacing smile. Just a tad bit, dear, considering the air conditioning in here. Her husband, Namura Hayado, tilted his head slightly in understanding, before a smile graced his face. Well, you know these hotshot scientists need a way to cool down, otherwise their brains would be steaming all the time. She rolled her eyes and tapped him playfully. Shush, dear, don't let any of them hear you. He waved her off, a relaxed grin on his half-bearded face. Bah, what are they gonna do? Kick me out? My 10-year-old son is up on their podium, schooling their best professors and scientists. I think I'm allowed some level of cheek. She immediately pinched the side of his cheek. And I'll grab your cheeks if you do anything here that'll embarrass Issei-chan. He's worked very hard to reach here. The grown man immediately pouted, his lips forming into a kitten-innocent facade. That's so mean, Haruka-chan. You know I'd never do anything that would show badly on Issei-chan. Haruka's lips twitched. Not intentionally, no. Namura immediately winced. I told you, dear, that thing with the panda bears was completely not my fault. Excuse me, a stern voice said, immediately cutting both of them off. The couple turned to the attention of the voice, finding in place a blonde-haired, bespectacled young woman with an immensely serious gaze which was cutting straight into them. Oh, see what you've caused, dear. We've been disturbing the people who came to listen to Issei-chan. Namura gave an apologetic laugh. Ah, I can't help it, you know. What man can remain quiet and solemn around the woman he loves? Oh, shush, dear, your flattery won't help you out this time. Haruka turned to the woman. Don't mind us, we're just here to make sure we pick up our son after he's done. We're not exactly the scientific type, as you can see clearly. Namura nodded in an exaggerated solemn manner. I don't understand half of the things people here say, and I don't even understand what this entire conference is for. The blonde woman merely rose an eyebrow. Your son. You are here to pick up your son. Haruka nodded, with a long sigh. Issei-chan already knows how to drive. Despite being so young, he picked it up without anyone even showing him. But of course, he's too young to have a license, so we're just here to root him on, and then pick him up at the end. I thought we were going to branch the ice cream parlor afterwards, dear. Issei-chan loves ice cream. No, dear, you love ice cream? Issei-chan just barely likes it. Eyes, the blonde woman said, pausing as in, Hayado Issei. That Hayado Issei, the one who's... Ah, look, dear, I think he's done. Haruka's eyes flickered across the enormous chamber, filled to the brim with numerous seats and individuals clearly wearing the colors of their respective universities and colleges, and other such individuals in elegant suits or lab coats that displayed, in one measure or another, their extravagant wealth, class, or prestige. Then, in the center of the auditorium, there stood a small, 10-year-old boy, standing on an elevated platform, with a black Pikachu. I choose you. T-shirt, a pair of plain jean shorts, some brown sandals, and a red baseball cap. He looked completely out of place in the gathering, as though he were the odd object out of a find-a-difference game. Yet, his gaze was happy poised, his smile was perky smart, and his entire posture screamed, I belong here. And that concludes my paper on the latent micro-radioactive energy potential in the atmosphere. Any questions? Immediately, there was a heavy cacophony of yells, a large clamor as hands immediately shot up into the air, all of them eager, some more than others, to have their curiosities sated, their questions answered, their problems and thoughts alleviated. The boy in question let out a large smile. I can only take 3 questions for now, please. My parents need to take me home before it's past my bedtime. There was a general symphony of well-meaning laughter. All right, you, the cool-looking Jiji in the sweet suit. The old man in question immediately leaped to his feet, smiling broadly. Professor Nakamura, Department of Physics, Tokyo University. The man said, introducing himself. I only have a rather simple question for you, Hayato-kun. Issei nodded. Sure thing. Your theory proposes that there exists a form of ambient energy in the atmosphere, one which allows for great manipulation of natural occurring elements down to their smallest cellular constituents, therefore making it possible to perform normally implausible feats like conjuring fire from thin air or aiding in advanced cellular regeneration. Once more, the small boy nodded. Do you believe that the energy could be harnessed, used? The boy interrupted, and the man blinked before nodding. Of course, it will take a while, but I've started work on a device which would be capable of identifying and quantifying the energy, the forms it takes, and I'll eventually begin experimenting to see if the energy is safe enough to be used by carbon-based life forms. There was a loud range of interested murmurs and curious expressions. Yes, you, next question. Dr. Mariwaka, Kyoto University. So does that mean that one day, humans will be able to conjure fire as though it was out of thin air, or use this latent energy to boost physical attributes? The boy smiled. I believe that this energy will redefine what it means to be human. The interested murmurs grew to a level of immense excitement and intrigue. Just one more question, please. Any other inquiries can be made on an online platform. Haruka Hayato had watched the proceedings with her mind barely able to wrap around anything that was going on, until the woman behind her had eventually raised her arm up. Yes, the pretty-looking lady behind my parents. Rachni Agars, Kyoto University. The woman said, her voice coming out rather plain. I simply have one question. Issei, in his exuberance, turned his baseball cap around, in an expression of seriousness that only made him look more endearing, causing a small wave of giggles and laughter. Do you believe in the supernatural? All at once, the entire auditorium fell relatively silent. I'm sorry, Agar-san, I don't understand how my belief has anything to do with my paper. The energy source you mentioned, she said briskly, cutting him off. The energy source that you claim is something of a radioactive nature that allows for impossible feats. What if I told you it is magic? The auditorium's silence peaked, until, all at once, there was a large wave of rancorous laughter. Did you hear the girl? Magic, she says. What in the world are they teaching those fools at Kyoto University? Next thing we know, they'll be telling us about fairies and elves. Oh, and witches. Ooh, scary witches. Although everyone was laughing, the laughter came to a slow stop, as the gathered congregation looked onto the form of the 10-year-old boy, and they noticed that he was not laughing. Instead, his eyes were perfectly crinkled into one of immense concentration. I don't believe in magic. The 5 words came out, each syllable more emphasized than the preceding one. Because you have yet to find any scientific evidence in favor of it. No, he said, shaking his head and causing no small amount of confusion. I'm pretty sure we all know the phrase, any sufficiently advanced level of technology is indistinguishable from magic. There was some positive murmuring. The boy, smiling, then asked who is to say that the reverse is not also the case. The auditorium was silent. Hypothetically, a time-traveling adventurer from the 30th century arrives today. He sees you have a problem, in which you invited a date to the homecoming dance, and don't own a vehicle or have money to rent one. He then takes you to a restaurant, as you select your favorite meal, and then he points at it with his finger. Then, before your very eyes, it turns into a fully sentient 80-foot-tall reptilian creature with wings, and says you may ride on it to your destination. The boy's eyes were clear, but they were sharp, even as the smile on his face never faded. You would call him a sorcerer. I would call him an accomplished scientist. And the common man, he grinned, they would call him a god. Present day. Issei-kun, I need some help in the kitchen. The young man found himself groaning in slight annoyance at the yells that came from above him. His time in the lab was supposed to be his time of solace and away from any sorts of distractions, because the work that he did in here was extremely delicate. To his left, a fully fitted and equipped science laboratory kit was present, with a vial of greenish liquid burning silently over a Bunsen burner. To his right, there were charts and diagrams of human anatomical figures and models, complete with a table and dissection equipment that sheened as they had recently been used, cleaned, and sterilized. To his front was a workstation filled with numerous different gadgets, nuts, bolts, screws, and other such electrical and mechanical appliances. The boy stood in front of the station, a pair of glasses in his hand which he slowly and methodologically tinkered with, as the lenses were a dark shade of green, and he used a small screwdriver to adjust the nuts and bolts on it. He finished, satisfied with his work, before he brought up his smartphone. Tiki, begin recording. Invention 374-1.6, Omni Vision Goggles, Test 31. His smartphone immediately lit up with a perky voice. Hi, recording in process, Issei-sama. Gently, the boy grabbed the glasses, and then put them on, before clicking a button at the side, and watching as they strapped firmly to his ears, before they faded away. Cloaking capabilities are fully functional under room temperatures and standard conditions. Still requires test under high and low pressure environments and high and low temperature environments. The boy let out a small breath before tapping a button at the side of the invisible glasses. Immediately, his vision lit up with numerous numbers and statistical data. Omnivision glasses vector calculation arithmetic seems to be fully functional. I can effectively calculate humidity, wind direction and speed, and temperature of objects and atmosphere. Then, he tapped another button once more, which, to the casual observer, would appear as though he was simply tapping the side of his head. Night vision capabilities are functional. Thermal vision capabilities are functional. X-ray vision capabilities are. At that moment, the door burst open. Young man, I called you to help me out in the kitchen. Abort, abort, code Oedipus. I repeat, code Oedipus. Haruka Hayatu could only stare blandly as a blinding flash seemed to appear out of nowhere, and then, a pair of glasses dropped from Issei's eyes which immediately appeared bright red and puffy. All she could do was raise one eyebrow at his swollen eyes that clearly looked like they hurt. I regret nothing, she sighed. Dinner's by 7. How long is it going to take you to fix up your eyes? He paused. A while, which I assume is probably just long enough for you to skip out on family game night again. He immediately bowed his head. An unfortunate happenstance. Her right eye twitched. Not unfortunate enough it seems. I cannot be blamed if I chose to blind myself rather than to endure the trauma of seeing my mother's naked body. Big words coming from someone who used to lunge his lips for my breasts any time I held them in my hands. I was an infant. You were 10. Issei opened his mouth to give a retort before closing it shut. Issei-sama, should I continue recording? Please do, Kiki-chan. I would love to have this tape played the next time Issei-kun thinks he can get clever with me. Issei groaned. Oh, don't you give me that, young man. I'm amazed you could create a robot as amazing as Kiki-chan. She's not a robot, Ka-chan. She's an ultra-advanced artificial intelligence program with pseudo-godlike control over all forms of technology. And she still has the most pleasant personality. I'm sure if Kiki-chan had a body, she'd be more than happy to help her old, frail mother in the kitchen. Issei's swollen, semi-blind left eye twitched. You're not old and frail, and I'm saying this at the risk of being classified with an Oedipus complex, young and hot, which is precisely why I'd rather blind myself than see you naked. And whose fault is that, mister? I never want to see you two get old. Issei's swollen, semi-blind right eye twitched. I was 12, and the aging inhibition formula I slipped into you and 2 sans T is completely intent-based. It enables your thought processes to be converted into rapid cell acceleration, like flexing a muscle. That means you can grow older if you want to. Haruka smirked, her young features looking as though she was a woman in her mid-20s, and one who was attractive enough to turn heads around the street multiple times. Then why exactly would I want to do that? Your father and I are the happiest we've ever been, and the sex has been just. L.A. Not listening. L.A. She rolled her eyes. Oh please, I've seen you perform autopsies on brutalized corpses without batting an eyelash, and somehow you regress back to an infant whenever I mention my bedroom activities with your father. Issei gave her a straight look, which was somewhat funny because of how puffy and swollen his eyes were. Ka-chan, in my infinite pursuit of all forms of knowledge of the world and the universe, to discover the meaning to life and the purpose of existence, nowhere in there does that call for me knowing or picturizing the concept of my parents involved in sexual activities. Haruka sighed. There you go again. You always revert back to using fancier terms and language whenever you get defensive. I'm not defensive, I just don't want to know what my mother does in the bedroom. Oh, that's not the crux of the matter, and we both know it. You always get defensive whenever I talk about things like getting a girlfriend, or sex, or going out to meet people your own age. He snorted. People my own age are hormonal-driven idiots. Sex is a time-wasting activity which consumes a great deal of energy and requires a ridiculously stupid level of openness in exchange for a rush of oxytocin, dopamine, and other biological chemicals that the brain interprets as pleasure, and I do have a girlfriend, Kiki. I didn't know we were a couple, Issei-sama. That's great. Haruka sighed. You're becoming a hikikomori, Issei-kun. Issei balked. What? Just because I decided that it's a waste of my time to go outside and communicate with 90% of the human population that are made up of fickle-minded, prejudiced, and ignorant people doesn't mean I'm becoming a shut-in. Haruka crossed her arms. Oh, come on, Ka-chan. You know how it is with me, I don't get normal people. They worry over the most insignificant things, do the most asinine things. They fail to plot their time and spend their lives drifting aimlessly from one day to the next in a set pattern of dull, meaningless actions that serve no further purpose than to fill a blankness and numb the sensation of time passing. Then they have the gall to call this facade living. The woman shook her head. All right, that's it, Issei-kun. I'm not going to allow you to spend the rest of your life in here alone. Issei, despite his eyes still swollen, blinked. Kiki, shut down and lock up Issei-kun's lab, and leave only the things he needs to fix his eyes available. The brown-haired boy let out a laugh. Nice try, Ka-chan, but Kiki requires a long, complicated master control code in order for you to give that command. Not even the CIA or MI6 would be able to crack the full, extremely randomized passphrase that would leave their best and brightest a sniveling, sobbing mess on the cold floor. There is no way in the world you could. Code phrase. I masturbated to Irina's pictures after realizing she was a girl. Passcode accepted. Commencing lockdown. Issei stared. Kiki, you traitor. Sorry, Issei-sama. I told you that in confidentiality. Haruka merely gave a satisfied smile as she watched the lab fold and compress on itself into numerous different vaults. I think it's cute that you have a crush on Irina-chan. Maybe you should go see her. Go explore your fleeting youth. I created a formula capable of stopping the aging process when I was 12. My youth is anything but fleeting. I can't believe I'm flying to England, Issei said with a grumble to himself, as he had a pair of large headphones which were placed on his head, but which were not playing any music however, and were instead placed there as a means to be able to legitimately ignore people under the guise of listening to music. However, he was using it at the moment to make a call. Oh, relax, Issei-kun. It's been what, 7, 8 years since you last met Irina-chan. I think she'll still remember you. He rolled his eyes. No, I can't believe I'm literally flying to England. If you hadn't locked down my lab, I'd have grabbed my teleportation belt and I'd be there already. No fancy go-go gadgets with you, Issei-kun. You always get distracted when you're with them. I do not. There was that time in Brazil. I just made a tiny detour. You went in search of the lost city of El Dorado. Okay, so not exactly a tiny detour. And what about the time in Hawaii? I wasn't distracted. I did get in the water with you and Dad, didn't I? Yes, until you decided to go searching for the lost city of Atlantis. It felt like a good idea at the time. And let's not forget what happened while we were in London. Issei winced. Yeah, we were almost barred from ever returning to the UK, weren't we? Well, considering that a little Japanese boy mistook the Queen's extravagant pleasuring tool for the sword of King Arthur. It was too realistic. It wasn't my fault for making the mistake. And the Queen is old. How was I supposed to know she still used something like that? My point, Issei-kun, is that misadventures seem to gravitate towards you whenever you're with your equipment. This time around, you're going simply to see a longtime friend, and then perhaps to hit it off with her, find love and have sex, and then give me some nice beautiful grandchildren. Issei took in a deep sigh. Ka-chan, I think you keep forgetting that I'm 16. Normal 16-year-olds don't have sex. Normal 16-year-olds also don't have 12 PhDs and 36 MDs. 37. He corrected automatically, before coughing into his hands, but that's not exactly the same thing. Besides, isn't Irina supposed to be a nun or something? Or a woman of the church? She's probably taken an oath to chastity. While some oaths were just made to be broken. Issei's fully healed left eye twitched. You're a horrible corrupting influence, Ka-chan. I love you too, Issei-kun. The boy let out a full-breathed sigh before his ears picked up something on the other side. Wait, Ka-chan, did you decide to send me to England to find Irina just so you and Tusen could have sex everywhere in the house without me around to make things awkward? ... No. Issei rubbed his nose in irritation. Disconnect call. The teen prodigy sighed as he got up to his feet, and then stretched as well as he could, before he eventually looked over to the time, and he realized that his flight would be in an hour. Really inconvenient. Fastest method of transportation, my ass. This has to rank amongst one of the stupidest thing I have ever done. Issei sighed to himself as he stood outside of Heathrow International Airport. He slowly rubbed his palm across his face, as his luggage was ludicrously light, consisting only of a small backpack which was slung across his back. His clothes were such in a manner that they would not seem out of place in a teen fashion magazine. Which was actually true, because his mother had been the one to buy them for him, and she had picked them straight out of a teen fashion magazine. With skinny jeans and sneakers and a hoodie, because London was cold, he would make for a rather attractive sight, if he was not repetitively slapping his palm into his face. Oh, I know, I'll just drop by her house and say hey. I haven't seen you in over 8 years. My mother found out that I once masturbated to a picture of you, and she thinks I have a crush on you, so she sent me halfway across the world so we can have sex. He sighed, before immediately bringing up his smartphone. Alright Kiki, I'm removing you from timeout. I don't appreciate you telling Ka-san the passcode, but I suppose these things happen. Yay, thank you Issei-sama. He rolled his eyes. Damn, he was a real softie. Alright. Now scan the local databases, phone records, addresses, contact information, social media platforms, and hijack the global satellites and street cams if need be. Find anything you can find on Irina Shido. You don't know her address, Issei-sama. It's been 8 years. She could have moved. His phone gave a brief beep. Found her, Issei-sama. I know I didn't give you a 1024 petabyte RAM for nothing. So, where is she? She seems to be leaving the secret headquarters of the Ordo Hermeticus Ori. Issei blinked. Come again. It's Latin for. Yes, I know it's Latin for the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and I know what the Golden Dawn is. My concern is, 1. They should have gone extinct since 1903, and 2. Irina is a member of the church. What is she doing visiting one of the largest single influences of Western occultism? I have gained access to their camera databases, Issei-sama. Would you like to see? You know me too well, Kiki. The image on the screen immediately went to that of a large, elegant room, and in no time at all, Issei was able to spot the chestnut-haired girl that was his childhood friend. Except, what in the world is she wearing? And, is that a sword at her hips? Irina Shido stood, across from a tall man with dark blonde hair and an intimidating physique. Though I understand your concern, I assure you, we of the Golden Dawn have nothing to do with the missing Excalibur fragments. Irina smiled, before sighing. Thanks, sorry for the inconvenience, but the Archbishop asked to check if Caliburn and Excalibur ruler were safe. The man snarled. They have been taken away by Arthur. Foolish young brat probably went off in search of some type of adventure. His sister is here, still scuttling uneasily around the halls, and it is clear she wishes to join her brother and leave, ingrates, the both of them. Okay, again, sorry to waste your time. May the blessings of the good Lord visit you. Issei stared at his phone screen as it went blank, as the video feed had effectively been cut off. The silence continued, even as people passed him by on the road, and he merely continued to stare at his blank phone. Issei-sama, did you know that there is a house of Pendragon in London? His entire body was absolutely rigid, but he was still able to utter a single word. What? I am perusing through local databases, Issei-sama. The MI6 computers have records of a House of Pendragon, and this House of Pendragon seems to be under the protection or influence of the Golden Dawn. He brought up his hands and immediately started massaging his temples. You're joking. The Arthurian legends are just that, legends. King Arthur never existed, the Excalibur never existed. There is a perfectly logical explanation for all of this. Issei-sama. Her tone came out completely low. There are official documents, the Excalibur. It exists. And that's not all that exists. Hayato Issei would have made for quite the sight, as his eyes rapidly perused his handheld device, his eyes going wider and wider in disbelief, in skepticism, even as the photographic evidence was before him, of golden-winged figures, of bat-winged figures, of dark-winged figures. Even as what looked like undoubtable evidence seemed to prove the terrors of the night, and they proved the existence of concepts that he had long since discarded in the name of them being mere fantasy. Issei immediately took in several deep breaths. Okay, let's say, hypothetically, devils and angels exist, as do ghosts and creatures of other mythologies. What does that mean? Well, it means that heaven and hell is equally real, souls are real, and that there really is a God. Issei-sama. Except, how then the universe come into creation? If there are numerous gods, which one was responsible for the creation of the universe? Did they all create it together, and then share themselves amongst the people of the earth when it was suitably populated? Or did one being create it all, and then the rest merely came into existence afterwards? Issei-sama. That is, of course, assuming that they are actually gods. Think, Hayato, you are the one who stated that any sufficiently advanced form of technology is indistinguishable from magic. What if these beings are not supernatural or magical, but merely other humanoid-based life forms that grew believing themselves as creatures of myth? What if all gods are merely an advanced alien civilization, who have learned to harness physics and chemistry in manners that humanity has not? What if the Christian God is really just a being from an advanced race or time, and all his feats or miracles are mere scientific achievements, but they are far too complex for my mind to unravel as science? Issei-sama. What? All at once, Issei's mind was drawn to the sound of whirling alarms and screeching tires. The MI6 discovered I was hacking their databases, and they're here to arrest you. I just discovered that gods could possibly exist, and you want me to worry about MI6 agents, he said, sounding baffled. Unless one of them has the last name Bond, I honestly don't think that's a priority right now. So, what are we going to do, Issei-sama? The boy dragged down his sleeves and put on a pair of white rubber gloves. What we always do, Kiki. He pulled his hoodie up and wrapped a green bandana across his face. Dazzle and baffle. Then, he added a pair of thick shades to completely obscure his face. Always, freeze. My name is Harry Potter, and I demand to meet with the Queen of England. Get on the ground, or we will open fire. For VOLDEMORT. With eyewitness reports claiming rather vividly that the man had called himself Harry Potter and had immediately incapacitated some of Britain's best and brightest by, I'm sorry what? He gave them erections, even the women. How does that make any sense? And the manhunt for the elusive terrorist Harry Potter goes on this evening ever since the mysterious man made his display at Heathrow International, in which he left the scene with mad screams of the killing curse and with trousers feeling slightly too tight for comfort. In today's top story, England gets hard for Harry Potter. It is a sad day indeed for all of England, when the name of one of its most famous fictional characters that has warmed his way into our hearts is now being used in acts of terror and destruction and sexual debauchery. All right, that's enough, Kiki. Cut off the local news feeds, I think I've had my fun. A young, 16-year-old boy said to empty air as he walked down the streets of London. He had his smartphone out in front of his face, and he let out a long, tired yawn as he craned his neck to the side, doing it in a manner that delivered a comfortable crack. As interesting as it is messing with the British Secret Service and all, I have more important things to do. Gods, devils, angels, I need more information on all of this. His smartphone gave an affirmative beep. I have reintegrated myself back into the MI6 computers, Issei-sama. By tracking my initial hack, I was able to install a backdoor program that enables me total undetected controls of their systems. That's my girl. What did you find? It seems that most high-ranking officials in the government and bureaucracies of the world are aware about the existence of the supernatural, in one way or another. Some of them even have notable contracts with high-ranking devils. Issei rubbed his nose. Devils. Hi Issei-sama. The President of America, for instance, is assumed to be in a contract with Lucifer, and the royal family of England, the Queen in particular, is in a contract with the Leviathan. There was a general unspoken agreement not to make this information public. There was an accord of this, but I am afraid that the information on the MI6 computers do not quite specify. Should I hack the Pentagon instead to retrieve more information, Issei-sama? Issei slowly rubbed his temples around his head. When he had set out to England on the whims of his mother, he was ready for pretty much anything. He was ready for Irina to slam a door in his face, or for her to call the police on him, or for an awkward situation arriving due to a lack of common ground and suitable topics of conversation. As they came to the disappointing realization that a brief childhood friendship was an empty facsimile that could not withstand the test of time and the growth of the individuals. Except, he had not been expecting to discover that Irina was some sort of secret agent for the Anglican, or was it Methodist, or Pentecostal, or Adventist church. There was also the fact that nothing had quite prepared him to come to terms with the knowledge that there were beings out in the world who called themselves supernatural. Issei scoffed out loud. Is something wrong, Issei-sama? Gods, devils, angels, ghosts, spirits, I call bullshit. Total and complete bullshit. Issei-sama, it is more likely to believe that these creatures are alien life forms that migrated to Earth, and ultimately, primitive humans, being unable to classify them as beings from an unknown and advanced civilization, decided to attribute their status to that of beings of myth, legend, and folklore. The boy began pacing, walking left, right, forward, and backwards as he placed a hand under his chin. Issei-sama, are you in denial? No, he said, a bit too loudly for his own liking. I'm a man of science, Kiki. I can't just close my eyes and say, oh, God is real, heaven and hell are real, and humans have souls. There are far too many problems arising from the declaration of those facts. If hell is real, and souls are to be sent there to burn and torture for all eternity, that is a problem. It is. Yes, he yelled, drawing some few, concerned stares his direction. The concept of hell is ridiculous. It would be to imply that souls which are hypothetically supposed to a spiritual conception are capable of feeling physical pain. How do you burn a soul? At that point, many people were edging away from the teen, and some had already begun to flip their phones out to call for an emergency service if needed. Fire is the rapid oxidation of material in the exothermic chemical process of combustion, and flames consist primarily of carbon dioxide, water vapor, oxygen, and nitrogen. How do these physical elements harm a soul? That would be to suggest or imply that the soul is made up of elements which are susceptible to detriment by flames, in which case, the soul isn't spiritual. The boy said, before palming his face and letting out a deep sigh. That is not even to go into the moral ramifications of hell. Eternity is a long time. The human mind cannot even conceptualize eternity, because we would be reaching past quintillions and sextillions of years, and we still wouldn't be close. To punish a serial killer or a sex offender for infinity would be the same as locking up a 6-year-old girl in a maximum security federal penitentiary for 98 years because she shoplifted an Oreo. He then began to rub his eyes. Even heaven isn't any better. Being punished for all eternity is horrible, but being told to enjoy for all eternity. Eternal pleasure and bliss. I can barely go 2 weeks just eating great stuff and having fun before I'm bored out of my mind. I can't imagine my soul being forced to live through septillions and octillions of years being happy. Unless they find some way to compress the passage of time to make a nonillion years feel like a second, and even then, it doesn't come close to the vast length of eternity. The scientist let out a bland sigh. Why did everything become so horrible, Kiki? I was content to believe that when I died, it would be complete cessation of existence. Bleak, sure, but it beats the alternative of an afterlife, of the unrealized horrors of eternal life. But now I know there's the possibility of me suffering for octillions and nonillions of years, all on the whim of some god. The boy clenched his fist. No way am I letting that happen. Kiki, despite being an artificial intelligence program, could not help but feel a sense of foreboding at those 7 words. Issei-sama, what are you planning? There was the slow, heavy chuckle of a teen that Kiki had grown to fear. First, I need data. I'm going to research. Angels, devils, spirits, zombies, all of them. I will put them on my table, and I will dissect them, study them, their inner workings, their chemical makeup, their biological components and weaknesses, everything. The teen's eyes regained a powerful spark to them. Then, I will capture God, and I will put God on my table, and smile as my scalpels dig deep, until I become the man who finds out where God came from. Kiki could only remain silent, as Issei then stretched his hands out. And then, I will strip everything down. Heaven, hell, the afterlife. I will stand and watch as those insults to the transiency of human life are ultimately demolished. Until there are no devils, no angels, and no gods. Issei smiled. Only man. Heavy, thick silence radiated, as Hayao Issei cast his gaze up onto the skies, and made out his declaration. Mummy, why is that creepy man talking to himself and smiling? Just don't look him in the eye, son. The police will take care of him soon. Issei's left eye twitched. Kiki, edit those two out when I ask you to play my grand dialogue about my questionable plan to destroy heaven and hell, will you please? Anything for you, Issei-sama. Thanks, Kiki. Now, onwards, to capture a fine specimen and conduct highly inappropriate experiments on it in the name of science. Large, heavy grumbles echoed out like the fat moaning of two whales in intercourse. Right after lunch. Excuse me, I remember quite specifically asking for a Pepsi with my fries and chicken. A Pepsi. This is a Coke Zero, not a Pepsi. And don't try to be a smartass telling me they're basically the same thing. If you were meant to be a smartass, you wouldn't be working at KFC to begin with. You know what? Never mind. Just get me a coffee instead. Yes, a coffee. No, I do not want tea, you bloody English wanker, I want coffee. What's with you British people and tea? You didn't even create it, you just ripped it off from China, and now it's like your national food or something. Oh, you better not have spat in this. If I find out you spat in this, I will take my sweet time tracing your family tree, your brother, your sister, your father and mother, your grandmother, and even your damn third cousins, and I will turn them all into coffee beans and make an unorthodox donation to Starbucks. Oh, what's that? The coffee is too cold. You want to give me a warmer one? Why, thank you. Hayatu Issei whistled a soft jaunty tune as he sat down and stared at his meal in happiness, ignoring the absolutely goddamn terrified looks of the people around him. Issei-sama is scary when he gets hungry. I have no idea as to what you're talking about, Kiki. This the third time I've had to jam communication systems to prevent civilians from reporting you to the police, Issei-sama. What? He was going to call the cops. He was the one who spat in my coffee. And you threatened to cannibalize his entire family for it. But I didn't, and I won't. It would be a waste of time creating a device that microsized and converted the complex human cell structure into that of a coffee bean. It would be much easier to just get him fired. Fired? You'd make him lose his job, Issei-sama. Oh, no, I meant literally fired. I'd drug him and have him shipped to Afghanistan under the guise of a homosexual prostitute carrying illegal contraband of yaoi porn. His fate will meet with a firing squad. Issei paused halfway through his chicken lap. Or he may just be beheaded instead. They probably won't want to waste their bullets. Issei-sama is really, really scary when he's hungry. The scientist took a calm sip of his coffee, allowing an almost pleasurable smile to come upon his face at the quality of the brew, and then giving a long, satisfied sigh as he could practically feel the caffeine begin to work its magic on his body. It was a bit of a hassle, altering his own body chemistry to allow for the maximum use of his metabolism, and then modifying his own metabolic rate to go above and beyond that of what could be considered human and normal. When he ate, food was immediately broken down into its constituent minerals and components, and these minerals and components were immediately distributed around his body in the most efficient manner possible. It ensured that he never got fat, because he considered being obese to be a large detriment to his day-to-day life and activities. And it also made it so he never truly needed to use the restroom, which he considered another detriment to day-to-day life. Any excess of minerals was stored, processed, and then used to provide more energy and stamina, thereby also cutting down how fast he got tired and exhausted, and consequently meaning that he only required about 2 to 3 hours of sleep a day. It was for that reason that despite just having endured a long, 12-hour journey from Japan to London, and subsequently escaping and evading its secret service, Issei was still sitting upright, rather than possessing the eyes of a man who had seen death knock on his door with a large, twisted scythe. The downside, however, was that he had a ravenous appetite. He was essentially a bottomless pit when he ate, so he never actually got full, which meant that he was technically always hungry, but was able to ignore this hunger and function normally. However, when his hunger did reach a point in which he could not handle, it growled aggressively, and oftentimes had the side effect of making him more cranky. The young teen let out a large, satisfied burp as he completed his meal, and then proceeded to pat his stomach, which, despite the amount of food he had made vanish, remained entirely flat. All right, now that we've completed that, BRRING, Issei rose an eyebrow. Hello, Issei-kun, Ka-chan. Please tell me you don't have anything to do with Harry Potter becoming the most wanted man in England. Issei coughed awkwardly. Really, Issei-kun? You had one thing to do, Issei-kun. One thing. Just go out there, meet Irina-chan, and hit it off. How did you end up making Harry Potter a terrorist? It just happened, Ka-chan. There was the sound of a heavy sigh over the phone. In any case, how's Irina-chan? I haven't actually gotten to meet her yet. What? Why? Well, I had Kiki hacked the MI6 computers to find her, which was what caused the entire Harry Potter incident in the first place, and I ended up finding something else. Something I still can't quite believe. Issei-kun, what did I tell you about getting distracted whenever you're with your gadgets? Ka-san, God is real. There was a heavy bit of silence over the phone. Well, of course he is. I wouldn't have such an amazing son if it weren't for him after all. Issei palmed his face. I think you're missing the point, Ka-san. No, I'm not. She said sternly. I may not always look like it, Issei-kun, but I've always believed, in one way or another. When I would wake up and look at my cute little boy, who would stand in university theaters and go to advanced science expositions, who would be personally invited by prime ministers and presidents alike, I knew, a part of me knew, that you were a precious gift to me, Issei-kun. A gift from something beyond anything I could ever begin to imagine. So, I have always believed, Issei-kun. Issei rubbed his cheek, not trusting himself to do anything else. In any case, oh, your father says that if you find an angel, you should take a picture for him. In a swimsuit. Wait, Namira dear, would you kindly like to tell me what you want a picture of an angel in a swimsuit for? Isn't your lovely beautiful wife enough? HMMM. Issei merely chuckled. And you young man, whether or not there is a god or not, you better get that posterior of your into high gear and find Irina-chan. She's part of the church, isn't she? She might even shed some more light on the matter, and you'll actually listen to her without thinking she's crazy. It's just perfect. He strangely agreed. Irina was with the church, and apparently not with the church in the manner he had assumed, as some form of cleric or nun, who had pointlessly wasted their entire lives in an empty dedication to a non-existent entity. She might even be an exorcist, in which it would provide him with the perfect chance to meet with a devil or demon and capture them. He could already feel his mouth begin to salivate at the prospect of being the first man to conduct scientific research on otherworldly creatures. Fine, I'll find her. Good. And the next time I call, there better be the voice of a nice young lady on the other end for me to listen to. The phone call disconnected, leaving Issei musing alone to himself in his seat at the restaurant. So, time to hunt down my old childhood friend. I wonder how life has been treating her so far. Well, she did look good, quite grown and developed. Kiki, I need you to run that video recording of Irina again. Issei-sama, you're not planning on masturbating to her again, are you? What? That's preposterous. To even begin to assume that I would debase myself to such a pitiful level in which I would sexually stimulate myself to images of my childhood crew. Friend, Kiki, I expected more from you. That's great and all to hear, Issei-sama. But if you're not planning on doing what I think, why are we heading towards the restroom? Just bring up the damn video, Kiki. It was surprisingly easy for people to forget that great men, no matter how fanciful, or how grandiose their names had become, or how magnificent their legends had twisted throughout time, were still men. Be it Adam, or be it Gandhi, be it Queen Esther, or be it Mother Teresa, all of them were human. They had possessed their flaws, their insecurities, their vices, their little thoughts of doubt, their moments of pain, their moments of triumph, all of them were inherently flawed. Hayao Issei had no delusions to even believe for even a second that he would be any different, that he would be someone who would use his intellect to advance beyond those tiny flaws and therefore become an inherently perfect individual. Or at least, that was what he told himself while he whacked off to Irina's sexy ass anyway. There were also other ways he could justify himself, if anyone ever felt the need to consider his actions as somewhat deplorable. All he would open his mouth and say would be the two words, King Solomon. King Solomon, famed and recognized for being one of the wisest men to ever walk the earth, was the man whose greatest sin had been his extremely grandiose lust, and he had been a pervert like no other. King Solomon, the wisest man in the world, was also known in order circles as the original Harem king. Truly, what did it say? That the man who had been blessed with supernatural wisdom beyond that conceivable by any other mortal man, had decided to amass a harem of at least 300 wives and 700 concubines. This was, arguably, the wisest man in history, and his flaw, his greatest and most incorruptible vice, was the fact that he had loved women and sex far, far too much. Was it to be interpreted that Solomon had been wise enough to understand the true beauty and nature behind the feminine form, to understand the fleeting transiency of human life, and had dedicated himself to filling his every moment with beautiful mounds of breasts, of naked bodies, and of pleasurable intercourse? Or was it to be viewed that the wisest and most powerful of men were mere unwitting slaves to the form and pleasure that was derived from being with their counterparts? That women possessed this inherent desire to enchant, fulfill, and complete them. The wisest man in the world would go against God, all for a woman. If it did not drive home the point that the feminine form was a thing to be feared, revered, and sought after, nothing would. Nothing you say will justify the fact that you just masturbated in the KFC bathroom, Issei-sama. Hayao Issei walked outside of the restaurant and coughed into his hand. Initiate code Eros Zeta. Issei-sama, you wouldn't. Activate memory cleanse. Time frame, 30 minutes. Initiate full system reboot on completion. There was a pause. Issei-sama, when did you finish eating your meal? And, when did we get outside? That was ages ago, Kiki, keep up. I might need to upgrade your random access memory to 8 exabytes when next I have the chance. It seems you're running slowly on just one. Moo, that's mean, Issei-sama. I have the fastest operating system in the world. Well, let's test that theory, shall we? Irina Shido, find her. Hi, leave it to me, Issei-sama, I'll find her and no. It was rare that Issei felt any form of concern for his AI, and even though he knew that there was nothing that would and could truly harm her, considering he had numerous amounts of backups of her central program, he couldn't help but feel slightly concerned at the sharp static noise that had immediately radiated from his mobile device. Kiki, truth be told, his biggest concern with Kiki would be that she would completely take over the internet and lead to some form of doomsday-level scenario with her powers. Though he did have a long list of contingencies to prevent that from happening, it was a scenario that would be extremely annoying to deal with. One would argue as to why he didn't just give his AI a perverted personality, and the truth was that he had. However, when Kiki started using her abilities to hack into private phones of celebrities, or record people whilst they were naked and show him the videos for his amusement, he had no choice but to deactivate that particular personality program. He hadn't deactivated it because he was a decent or honorable person, nor had he done it because he felt he was invading on their privacy. Oh no, he couldn't care less about the moral etiquette. He had disabled it solely because what he saw, it was too much. Till today, Issei had not quite forgotten the day when Kiki had hacked into the personal computer of a hot teenage girl, and then spurned him with the idea of beating it off to her. He had been hesitant at first, but then grew excited as he watched her undress from the view of her webcam, only to freeze as his eyes came upon large, horrifying scars that littered her back and legs. There was no explaining how utterly filthy he felt when he discovered that she was a victim of domestic assault. His attempts at cleansing his conscience had included eventually anonymously reporting the case and providing supporting evidence. Still, no matter how he had ultimately saved that girl's life, saved her from her trauma, and no matter how he argued that if it were not for him, she would have continued to suffer, it didn't quite make him feel any less like filth. That was when he had noticed the pattern. Tough, impeccable girls who acted like hard asses were struggling deeply to maintain a facade, and cute, innocent girls who you believed couldn't hurt a fly were the types that would dress up in leather and were virulent nymphomaniacs. The kind smiling policeman was actually a hidden serial killer, and the angry-looking biker with the dragon tattoo was in fact a big softie who slept with a teddy bear and nightlight. People, the true nature of people, it revealed themselves when they believed they were alone, when they thought that there was no one watching them. Issei had seen it, and come to one sharp realization. It was ugly. Broken messes, secret incestuous relationships, marital assaults, domestic abuse problems, hidden drug problems and addictions, sickening fetishes. Issei truly did not want to see any of it. Not ever again. So, he stuck to cat videos. And hentai. Tons and tons of hentai. Strictly for research purposes, of course. The fact that he needed to watch copious amounts of hentai to write a thesis on the evolution of art style in the Japanese adult animation history was just a silent bonus. Not that he'd ever admit that to anyone, or out loud for that matter. Ah, sorry Issei-sama, something seems to be jamming my search. His mind was drawn from his reminiscing slowly as he blinked. Then, Kiki's words registered in his mind, and he stared in disbelief. I designed you to have access to every single satellite in orbit, and if you wanted to, you could cause them to short-circuit and rain down to the Earth like meteors in the apocalypse. You can instantly crash the stock market, and completely negate the currency of every country in the world at the push of a button. You can hijack cars and airplanes, and even gain the nuclear launch codes to the world powers and cause World War III in a matter of minutes. So tell me, what in the world could possibly be jamming your signal? When he had told his mother that Kiki had pseudo-godlike control over all forms of technology, he had not been exaggerating. Not in the slightest. Its interference, like an electromagnetic pulse, but being distributed at subtle frequencies not unlike radio waves. Ah, Issei-sama, the source, it's getting closer. Issei rose an eyebrow. How close? It's 4, 3, 2. His phone fell out of his hand, crashing into the ground and immediately scattering into a mess of parts, just as he felt someone bump into him. Oh, I'm so sorry. Issei's eyes flickered from his crashed phone, which was his major means of communication with Kiki, as well as his only means of finding Arena, and then turned his gaze instead to the young girl in front of him. His mind had already begun whirling 1,000 miles a minute. Blonde hair, blue eyes, 150 centimeters, dressed in unusual garb that made her look as though she was just coming from a Harry Potter convention. Her voice was soft, her manner of speaking elegant, her posture, however, was shaky, uncertain, her mind was clearly preoccupied with something, which was also the reason she had failed to take note of where she was going. Still, rather than mentioning any of these things, Issei gave her a bland look. I thought it was Dorothy that got lost, not the witch. Her form immediately went rigid. Excuse me, I'm not an expert on fashion, but I think the large blue witch's hat, the robes, and the cape easily classifies you as a witch. Then there is the rather wonderful coincidence that you happened to stumble across me just when Kiki felt something jamming her systems. And whilst I question my sanity at the prospect of believing that witches are real, I'm about to suspend my disbelief and just assume that you are in fact a witch. The young blonde girl opened her mouth, and then closed it, and then opened it again. Issei, to his part, unabashedly, grabbed the girl's cape, taking it up to his nose and taking a quick whiff. What are you? He then carried the girl's hat, taking another whiff of it, before biting softly at the edges, causing the girl in question to turn flustered. What are? He made to reach for her robes, and she leapt back, face slightly red. What are? Why you doing? You smell and taste normal for a witch. No, you taste more like a teenage girl than a witch. Perfumes, sanitizers, numerous amounts of cooking spices, detergent, and nothing out of the ordinary. No smell of cauldrons or pots, or any form of brews, no remnants of any materials that my taste buds are unable to identify. Why you were tasting me? Oh yes, I needed to confirm if there was anything off, or perhaps I made a wrong logical leap and you are just an ordinary girl in a witch's outfit. Unlikely considering that your name is Lefay Pendragon. The girl's eyes immediately widened, and she took a step back, her body language immediately becoming hostile and worried. How did you? You stitched your name into the bottom part of your hat. I ran my tongue across the letters when I bit into it earlier, he said as though it was the most obvious thing in the world, before sighing and rubbing his temples. Considering how you reacted when I mentioned your name, I assume you really are a witch. But Lefay Pendragon, really? Jesus fucking Christ, if it weren't for me being consciously aware that I did not ingest any hallucinogenic drugs, I believe I was high right now. He then blinked and stared at her. Considering how you look too damn cute to be real, I'm beginning to suspect that might actually be the case. The girl's face immediately turned red. Sisiku. Issei palmed his face. For heaven's sakes, you have a face and body that would easily put A-list actresses to shame. Why in the world are you stuttering when someone calls you cute? You should have heard that at least 1,000,000 times over by now. Well, I haven't really. How could you not have? Issei's mind came to a slow stop. Lefay Pendragon. The House of Pendragon. Pendragon as in the last name of the legendary King Arthur, and the House of Pendragon as in his direct heirs or relatives. The same Pendragons that were said to be under the protection of the Golden Dawn. Protection, however, was a rather questionable term. What were they being protected from? Enemies of Arthur, descendants of enemies of Arthur. And this protection, at what cost was it delivered? He could tell immediately. In Hayatu Issei's vision, words lit up as his eyes dashed back and forth all over the girl's form. Homeschooled, sheltered, happy, enthusiastic, polite, optimistic, kind, generous, caring, prone to attachment, innocent, naive. Issei waved off the words from his vision, scowling as the last one stood, bright and most clear amongst others. Shush. I'm trying to ignore the compulsion to open your pretty sheltered eyes to the harsh realities of the world before you go out there and get your heart broken, or worse, get yourself killed. Don't say anything, just stand there and scowl. She blinked at him, staring strangely. I said scowl. You're not scowling. No one's ever told me that before. Issei rolled his eyes. Of course they haven't. Most people are afraid to speak their mind for fear of being ostracized, mocked or ridiculed. And, you're not. I'm not what? Afraid of being ostracized or mocked. No, he said plainly. When I was younger, maybe, but I made a promise to my mother. I would never lie. I would be true about my thoughts, about myself. I would express myself as honestly as I could, and whether people accepted it or not, it was their business. The girl, curious, stared at him. So, you don't lie. I don't lie. Never. Not when it matters. He admitted. I can joke around and divert the truth once in a while, but I don't explicitly lie. There was a strange, lofty silence that held for a few more seconds. Oh, by the way, I may need to take you to a lab and conduct a series of invasive experiments on you to discover if you really do have reality warping abilities that you call magic. Then, that strange lofty silence immediately veered off into a silent, uncomfortable one. What? Witches? No, you can't. Hayatu Issei's mind ran 1,001 light-years a nanosecond as he donned a pair of white gloves and twirled a pen in his hand. This, you won't get away with. Immediately compiling and compounding any form of information he had accrued over his 16 years of life about that single word. A woman thought to have magic powers, especially evil ones, popularly depicted as wearing a black cloak and pointed hat and flying on a broomstick. Synonymous with sorceress or enchantress. Derived from Old English, Wicca. Condemned by Christianity and Islam. Viewed as heresy and apostasy. No, I can't anymore. Somehow, Issei was finding it impossible to relate the fearful concept of a being with alleged mythical powers, and the laughing, squealing girl in front of him. Ticklebot, return. All at once, a miniature lupine-shaped object leapt out of the top portion of the young girl's shirt, before immediately morphing into a sleek silver wristwatch that slapped itself onto his right wrist. Immediately, the young woman who had finally been given some reprieve turned to give him the harshest glare she could muster, though, because of how slightly out of breath she was, and her general composure, the glare looked more endearing than it did look threatening. I believe an African proverb once said, "The frown on the face of a goat does not stop it from being taken to the market." Issei said dryly, before rubbing his chin. Curious people they are, Africans, hundreds and thousands of tribes and the most convoluted ways of making points. Like Rafiki for instance. I swear, so much would have gone easier if someone had taught that damn monkey not to speak in parables. Lefay merely pouted some more. You kidnapped me. No, I didn't. Technically, the definition of kidnap is to steal, carry off, or abduct by force or fraud, usually for the use as a hostage or ransom. He said plainly, I did none of those things, and you followed me here, into this lab, on your own 2 feet, without any form of coercion whatsoever. Her cheeks puffed. That's because you put that tickling spell on me. I didn't know how to get it off and had to follow you. Issei merely gestured his hands to the side. Spell? What spell? I have no idea as to whatever you mean. Besides, shouldn't I be the one worried about my maniacal blonde stalker who kept laughing as she followed me everywhere I went? Lefay's face immediately went red. That's not. Issei waved his hand. All of that is old news. Besides, I'm not one to keep a grudge. I don't mind if you're a little yandir, just as long as you don't go overboard with it. Lefay gaped. But I'm not. Anyway, let's get back to business, shall we? I'm sure you would not have taken such lengths to sign up as my subject in this experiment all for nothing. B, but I didn't. Negativity isn't welcome when I'm in the lab, Kuai. I can, I will, and I shall are now your 3 favorite phrases from now on. Now repeat after me. Whatever Issei could have said next was rapidly interrupted by a strong gust of wind which seemed to originate from nowhere. No, it did originate from nowhere. They were inside a university laboratory, with all the windows shut and with decent air conditioning. Yet, there was no explaining the strange gust which had sent his hair flying backwards and his eyes wide. Or rather, there was no explaining the fact that the focal point of the gust had come from the young girl directly in front of him. She had a slightly more serious appearance, and her arm was extended out, revealing a walking stick, no, a staff, as her entire posture seemed to have shifted and changed. One of Issei's eyebrows tilted slightly to the top. I am sorry, but I cannot humor you any longer. My name is Lefay Pendragon, and though I understand that you seem to be a nice person, I can not continue. 2. She found herself trailing off once she noticed the immediate spark in the boy's eyes. They were shining, quite prominently, as his hands had become an ungodly blur and he began furiously writing on a jotter. Casual manipulation of wind pressure and humidity, no possible explanation derived. Subject does not possess any hidden devices on her person capable of conjuring bursts of wind suitable to flip numerous pages of hardback textbooks. She blinked. Immediately, he stopped writing, and in a flash, Lefay stared as her staff was immediately in his hands. Wooden walking device, no hidden equipment, gears or levers, no secret compartments, no installed fans, no, nothing. He immediately turned to her, his eyes staring seriously, and Lefay noted, with some bit of curiosity, that he was staring at her with seriousness in his gaze for the first time she had met the weird, enigmatic stranger. How did you do that? How did you create that gust of wind? She blinked, staring at the intense curiosity in the boy's eyes, before she allowed herself a small giggle and smile. Magic. Lefay Pendragon had admittedly heard a lot of things that people would say when they were faced with the surprising, often unbelievable fact that magic existed, and it ranged from outright shock, to complete surprise and disbelief, to incoherent religious ramblings and crazy panic attacks. I think I need to make a phone call. She had never quite heard that before. You what? I found a witch. Well, technically I subdued her with my tickle bot and made her follow me to a lab where I was going to begin conducting experiments. You what? Issei grimaced, removing his phone from his ear before putting his finger into it to make sure it wasn't bleeding. The last thing he needed was for a police officer to stop by and wonder why he was in a blood-stained phone booth. Young man, what was our agreement on conducting experiments on people? Issei sighed. They have to be willing participants, death row inmates or the scum of society who have no other redeeming qualities but to be butchered for the scientific advancement of their race. And does this girl fall into any of those categories? Does she? Issei sighed once more. No, Ka-chan. So would you mind telling me why exactly you wanted to break our agreement? Issei rubbed the bridge of his nose. Article 4, Clause 3, Section 6, Subsection 12 of the Hayadu Matriarch Accord. There was a brief pause. In the case of conducting studies and experiments on potential life forms of origins which are questionable and not humanoid, what? Issei-kun, this is the exception you made in case you ever encountered aliens. Precisely. She's not an alien. I don't know what she is. You said she was a witch. I'm right here. I'm talking to my mother here, woman. Jesus, show some respect. What? Jesus is there with you too. Issei palmed his face. First you make Harry Potter a terrorist, and now you're teaching Jesus about respect. You had one job, Issei. Issei rubbed his nose. Ka-chan, I'm not with Jesus. You're not. I'm with King Arthur's great-great-granddaughter. How's that any different? It's completely different. They're not the same people. Well, at least I think they're not the same. He paused, turning to Lefay. You're not Jesus, are you? There was a long moment of silence, in which Lefay could only stare at the ludicrousness of the question. I don't think so. Well, she says she's not sure if she's Jesus or not. Jesus is a woman. Issei groaned. Wait, did she say you made Harry Potter a terrorist? He immediately palmed his face. This was going to take a while. Hayadu Issei grumbled as he rubbed the slightly red palm imprints, staring at the smiling that was now sitting beside him, in a restaurant, sporting a proud and large M in front of it. For such a small girl, you have a pretty mean right hand. She stared at him, smiling, looking prim and proper throughout, though Issei was reminded painfully by the small red palm print on his face that the girl could be vindictive when need be. That's for defaming Harry Potter. He gave her a stare. What, is he someone you know personally? And, she continued, as though she had not heard him speak at all. It was also for making you follow me halfway across London, a laughing mess. Issei managed his lips to twitch. You blew my expectations out of the water. Lefay blinked. What? Issei tapped his watch, and the girl was on guard, prepared for another horrific torture of laughter. But she was only surprised when instead of the abominable robotic bunny of chuckling death, she was met by a regular timer. 7 hours, 48 minutes, 53 seconds. He stated, plainly. That's how long it took you to vent out your frustration and finally hit me. It blew my expectations out of the water, because I had estimated at least 12 hours or more. Of course, I suppose I have Harry Potter to thank for that. Lefay stared. You were timing me. Of course, Issei said as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Why, call it a test if you will, either of your patience, of the limits of your kindness, and to see whether that kindness overreached into timidity of the incredibly destructive variety, Issei said, before shrugging. Lefay merely stared at him, her left eyebrow raising slightly in confusion. Issei groaned, before elaborating. Let's be honest, you just spent the better part of 7 hours following around a total stranger, who honestly could have done anything to you from drugging you to knocking you unconscious. If you didn't have some level of disagreeableness and spine, I would have questioned how you had not already been impregnated by some moron whispering sweet nothings into your ear. Her face immediately went beet red. Oh come on, it's just a blatant truth. I believe this part of the world has rather noticeable rates of teen pregnancies, and wait, please tell me you know what the birds and the bees are. No one can be that sheltered. She pouted, her face going redder. That's mean Hayaru-sensei. I know what they are. Issei let out a brief sigh. Good, that saves me the trouble of having to. Issei stopped abruptly. How did you know I was a doctor? Lefay blinked. You just called me Hayaru-sensei. Silence. How did you know my name? I must have heard your mother on the phone. Issei's eyes narrowed. My mother never calls me that. Why would your own mother call you by your surname or title? No, I never mentioned my surname to you. I never even said it in passing. Lefay was smiling. She was smiling in that nice, sweet way that was expected of an innocent girl of her demeanor. That was expected of a young, sheltered, innocent woman without an evil bone in her body. She was smiling quite exactly in the manner of the cute, reserved, potential love interest of an anime male lead. Except, human beings were not that one-dimensional, nor were they perfect. By the time Issei realized this, he found himself frozen to his seat as Lefay Pendragon let out a long sigh and moved closer to him. All at once, he realized that he literally could not move, and at the exact same time, all 5 of his senses were drawn to the form of the girl that sat beside him. His eyes could not stop themselves from staring at her developing mounds and fantasizing about her creamy thighs. His ears could not help the concurrent rhythm that was the girl's heart. His nose could not help but take in her aroma of perfumes and condiments. His throat and lips could not help but be dry at the thought of claiming her suckled jaw as his. She immediately stretched over towards him and smiled. You really shouldn't ask too much questions, Hayaru-sensei. Issei's mind was whirling, his heartbeat was pacing, and he was trying to do whatever he could to stop himself from thinking, because all he could think of was the woman in front of him, and that was very, very bad. This doesn't make any sense, this doesn't fit your character archetype. She laughed, genuine laughter, he noted. My what? Your character archetype, blonde, cute, dedicated to service, diligent, innocent. All at once it clicked. The word, that one word, when it had come to the forefront of his vision, when he had seen it, blinking brilliantly more than anything else, it wasn't because the girl in front of him was naive. She was too naive. Naive to a degree that was impossible. A degree in which she would have died the instant she made contact with society. Oh, do continue, Hayaru-sensei. Perhaps you believed me easy to read when we first met. Of course she had been easy to read, for heaven's sake she had been wearing. His mind came to a stop once more. Why would a witch be wearing clothes that would easily make her stand out in modern London? Clothes that clearly identify her as a witch, even when she's supposed to be hiding that fact. Why would she even go to the lengths of embroidering her full name under a witch's hat, whereas the initials would be just as sufficient? Lefay smiled. Why indeed? Issei found it incredibly rare to find himself so rather flat-footed. And of course, you just happened to bump into me in a manner that destroys my cell phone, my central hub for Kiki. Lefay was still smiling, except, curiously, it wasn't malevolent, nor was it scheming nor manipulative. It was not the smile of the cat that had caught the canary, nor was it one of condescending smugness. It was the pure, innocent smile of a young teenage girl. And that was what amazed him the most. What is my name, Hayaru-sensei? Lefay Pendragon. The last part, can you say it again? Pendragon. Just once more, pretty please. I don't see what your point is. 3 syllables, sensei. She said, 3 syllables. I believe you should have dabbled in onomastics, the study of names. Tell me then, what would the historical, anthropological, psychological, and sociological consequences of being named Lefay Pendragon? All at once, he realized his grave miscalculation. He could think of numerous implications of harboring that name, and most particularly, one stood in his mind most prominently. I am a direct descendant of King Arthur, the one true king of England. By that merit, myself and my brother have direct ties to the throne. Direct ties. And she had to say this with her chest squishing against his arm. Focus, Hayaru, focus. But yet, we're in hiding. Being protected by the Golden Dawn as though we have something to fear from the outside world. Tell me, wouldn't you think that people in line to one of the oldest monarchical systems in the world should be treated a little more like royalty? Is it so much of a far-fetched idea? She let out a sigh. Of course, we're not. England's queen is little more than a figurehead and the monarchical system has been all but abandoned. Then of course, there is the fact that revealing our status to the world would cause chaos as researchers and scholars like you, she bopped him on the nose, would be left in shock at discovering that King Arthur really did exist. The discovery would reshape everything they believed and thought to be myth, and of course, it would reveal the supernatural factions to the world, causing problems for everyone. She glowered. And so, we live our lives like hermits, watched like lab rats, forgotten like used tissues. Truth be told, Issei had only focused on one part of that entire thing. You know who I am. At this point, she laughed once more, and what made it more and more bone-chilling was the complete and utter sincerity of the laughter. The real question you should be asking Hayato-sensei is who doesn't know who you are. Oh snap, Hayato Issei, once in a millennia child prodigy, schooled everywhere from Harvard to Yale to MIT. Guinness Book of World Record holder for the youngest person in history to accrue 12 PhDs and 37 MDs. Founder and CEO of Honest Technologies and Laboratories. Creator of the Open Children Foundation. Lead archaeologist in the discovery of the ruins of El Dorado. Philanthropist, billionaire, inventor, and scientist. She smiled, taking a cup of coffee to her lips, sipping it, and giving him a wry look. Am I missing anything? Issei grinned. You forgot to mention my penchant for harem anime and my love of classical literature. She giggled. Cute. Issei, despite himself, managed to smirk. You know, I'm somewhat impressed. Here I thought you were an empty-headed, overly kind blonde girl who'd cling to me like a lost puppy or gain some sort of romantic inclination for me because I called her pretty and act kindly to her a few dozen times. Lefay let out an amused smile. What type of girl would fall in love with a boy simply because he shows her kindness? Girls of the abused variety. Lefay blinked. That's not nice, sensei. Nice is for people who are bothered that their unfiltered opinions will garner them social rejection, and as such filter their words as necessary to avoid negative social backlash. But not you. Surely you don't care about any negative social backlash. Because, as you said, you don't lie. That's right, I don't. So then, Lefay smiled. Tell me, what do you think of me so far? Of this encounter? Issei hummed to himself. You smile a lot. Lefay couldn't help the smile that came to her face at that, confirming the boy's words as fact. Still, Issei's eyes roamed over the girl's form once more. This time around, he did so very carefully, and strangely enough, he wasn't doing so in the perverted manner. Words snapped up, from one to the next, and his eyes picked them up, sharply, allowing no reprieve from one to the next. You know, he said, out of the blue most people are unable to grasp that someone can be kind and yet, at the same time be clever. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Kindness is naturally associated with meekness and docility, and it's difficult to imagine a quote-unquote kind person being ambitious, or cunning, or even intelligent. As though intelligence removes one's ability to feel empathy or compassion, and you need to be hopelessly optimistic or helplessly naive to maintain a positive, generous outlook in life. Lefay Pendragon managed to stare at him in surprise. Thank you, I suppose. Though, where's this coming from? Oh, don't mind me, I'm just making random observations because I'm stalling for time to allow the wristwatch I placed on the table turn back into my ticklebot and attack you. Silence. Ticklebot. No mercy. Tickle commencing. No sooner had the object left its initial point, had Issei regained his ability to move. As indicated, the tiny tickle bunny of death slipped under Lefay's robes once more, and the young girl was unable to stop herself from bursting into a mad, incoherent mesh of laughter. Issei wasted no time as he leapt from his position, and dashed out of the restaurant as quickly as his 2 legs were capable of carrying him. He bumped into one of the McDonald's employees on purpose, pilfering the man of his iPhone in a quick slip of his hands, before turning down the road and tearing away from the restaurant like as though the hounds of hell were on his feet. Hello, this is Siri, how can I help you too? I don't have time to chat with you, you laughable excuse for a pale imitation of an artificial intelligence program. Issei said, without missing a beat, his eyes still flicking backwards just in case. His fingers blurred through the device, bypassing root folders and accessing the internet in seconds. Download Kinetic Improvisation Knowledge Interface. Password required to install program Kiki. Vi Veri Universum Vivis Visai. By the power of truth, I, while living, have conquered the universe. Password accepted. Installation complete. There was a brief pause. Issei-sama. What's going on? Why are we? The heavy echo of soft, feminine laughter reached his ears, and Issei swore as he turned his attention behind him, where, without a shadow of a doubt, the laughing form of Lefay Pendragon seemed to be in hot pursuit. I may or may not have made the stupid mistake of underestimating a witch born from the union of King Arthur Bloody Pendragon and Morgana Bloody Lefay. Underestimating. I had assumed she was a Class D female anime protagonist. The ones with little to no history, personality, or memorable traits. Exactly. Come, oh heavens, my ribs, back here. Issei could only blink as he found himself being suspended in place by another indescribable force, one which he would have likened to the effects of a telekinetic hold. He hissed under his breath, his mind slowing to a crawl. She wouldn't risk using showier or more fanciful demonstrations of magic. Despite it being late evening, they were still on the streets, still within the range of cameras and people. And as such, it meant that he could and would escape if he played his cards right and evaded whatever technique she used to halt his movements. There had to be a range of limitation, otherwise she would be a goddess with the ability to freeze the movements of everyone, everywhere in the world. This of course worked with the assumption that this magic of hers operated on a form of logic, though, as far as he was aware, that was a contradiction of epic proportions. I must ask why we are fleeing away from her, Issei-sama. My initial scans of body language and brainwave patterns indicate that she bears no ill will or malicious intent towards you. Issei grit his teeth as he tried to move. That makes it even worse. It would have been preferable if she was trying to kill me, or maybe even kidnap me, but she's not, and she went through the trouble of researching me, which means she's trying to recruit me as her ally. Recruit you for what? Something certainly dangerous, potentially and most probably illegal, and something that will put me in the crosshairs of this supernatural world, which I do not want to happen. He still couldn't move, much to his chagrin, even as the laughing girl got closer and closer, causing him to bite the inside of his cheek as thought after thought escaped his mind. If only he had some of his gadgets with him, but no, he had to listen to the advice of his mother and not take them along. Damn it, Ka-chan, listening to motherly advice is supposed to save your life, not put it in peril. Thankfully, there was always a savior in the form of Kiki. The revving sound of a car echoed loudly down the street as a sleek black BMW raced down the road, and in seconds, without even bothering or attempting to slow down, the car swooped in, driver's seat door open, but no one in the vehicle as it pulled up directly beside him and bumped into him, allowing his immobile form to crash into the car. The door was slammed shut once the sole passenger was confirmed, and it immediately zoomed off with a powerful roar of the engine, leaving Issei sighing in utmost relief as his eyes hit the rear-view mirror and watched the blonde-haired form of a laughing witch become smaller and smaller until it went completely out of sight. He regained his ability to move once more, and he immediately adjusted himself into a proper sitting position as he took a deep sigh. Thanks, Kiki, I owe you one. The self-driving car, now being remotely controlled and piloted by Kiki, merely gave a hum, which echoed from the vehicle's radio speakers. Forgive me for asking Issei-sama, but if you were not interested in whatever she wished to offer you, would it not have been better to merely listen to the offer and then refuse it? No, he said, rubbing his knees which had been slightly hurt by the surprise boarding into the vehicle. A refusal of an offer adds a sense of definiteness to a matter, which is just as bad as accepting. Saying no would either cause her to go for a more desperate tactic, or force whoever she's allied with to become curious as to the reason of my refusal. Instead, if I never hear the proposal to begin with, the result is uncertainty which will fade away in time, as long as I make myself scarce. Are you positive, Issei-sama? Issei took in a deep breath and sighed. Think of it as a will they or won't they situation. Romantic circumstances in harem comedies are interesting and tense because you don't know if the people involved will ever get together or not. The minute they make their choice, the intrigue is lost due to the concrete definiteness. Humans, despite what they may think, are more invested in the uncertain than they are in the definite. But Issei-sama, if that's the case, wouldn't she be more interested in finding you instead? Which is precisely why I'm making myself scarce, Kiki. The uncertainty and intrigue will hit a point of diminishing return sooner or later. Just like watching a bumbling harem protagonist agonize for over 100 chapters about whether or not the girls he likes also likes him back, even though everyone around them can clearly see it. After a point, you toss your hands in the air and scream fuck it. There was what sounded like a pout coming from the speakers. You really love referencing harem anime, Issei-sama. Issei's left eye twitched. Kiki, when I was 3, my goal in life was to become a harem king. Tell me, what kind of idiot would I have been to not research the complexities of harems and to not watch as much fictional material centered on a theme that was my life's goal? He shook his head. That's like saying that my dream is to become the greatest soccer, oh wait, we're in England, football, player in the world, and yet I never watch a single match. Come on, no one can be that stupid. In an alternate universe, a brown-haired boy entered a series of sneezing fits. As long as you don't start thinking you're a harem protagonist, Issei-sama. Issei's looked appalled. Heavens no. Being a harem protagonist is unadulterated torture. Either you're illogically clumsy, aggravatingly indecisive, or serially abused. Most times, you're all three. The vehicle made a sudden, harsh stop at a red light that nearly caused Issei to smash his face into the glass, and served as a reminder as to why seatbelts were invented. But that can't be completely true, Issei-sama. I think some of them are kind, compassionate, and generous. Towards females, members of their own sex are either their mentors, rivals, enemies, or competitors, but never allies or friends, and as such, eliminates the need to show generosity or compassion towards them. Okay, but there are others that are fierce, loyal, and strong. Blatant tokens to numb the ache of their already irredeemable personalities. Oh, but there are some of them that aren't indecisive, but are capable, confident, and are empty facsimiles whose hypercompetence and absence of flaws makes them the furthest thing from human. There was a moment of silence in which only the soft humming of the engine could be heard. You really hate harem protagonists, don't you, Issei-sama? Oh, you have no idea. Elsewhere, Lefay Pendragon pouted as she finally arrived at the Stonehenge. Sighing to herself, she tapped her staff onto one of the large slabs of rock, making 3 soft taps before, to the ordinary eye, she phased through the stone and vanished. She then appeared in the middle of a large room, tugging away at her cloak and removing her hat as her gaze then turned to someone else who was in the room. Someone with similar blonde hair, but of a darker variety, wearing a pair of glasses and staring at a book. He sat on a large chair easily reminiscent of a throne, and he snapped his book shut upon noticing the arrival of the woman. Well, she sighed. I'm sorry, Naisama. I had the Red Dragon Emperor in my hands, but I think my approach may have scared him off. The man nodded slowly, his eyes closing in brief contemplation. Did you tell him about the existence of his sacred gear? She shook her head. I didn't mention anything about it, not until I'm certain of his allegiance. He nodded. The young man swayed immediately to his feet, his gait poised and royal, his form elegant and regal, as though the very floor on which he walked on recognized the superiority of his blood and the right of his claim. Very well. Leave him be for now and continue with the plan until a more suitable opportunity arrives. Regardless, I do not have much time to spend with you before Volley and Kuroka get suspicious. Here, keep these hidden. He brought out 2 swords, 2 shining, glistering swords, except these were swords that were no mere swords. Swords that, despite their limited power as it was broken, they still possessed a strange, soft hum, as though the blades resonated with the duo in front of it. The Excalibur fragments. Lefay breathed. He nodded. Just a matter of time, sister. When Excalibur becomes one again, we will make our move, and we will take back what is rightfully ours. Lefay could only smile and nod as she stared at her brother, and as she stared at the proof that all of this was happening, and that this reality, the one in which she would help her brother accomplish his dream, that they, together, would once more rise and make the world remember the name. It was hard and painful. When one heard those 5 words uttered, vast and lacking any context, numerous amounts of interpretations could be derived from them. Some would attribute it to a description of a blunt object striking the epidermal layer and causing damage. Others would cough awkwardly as they used it to describe listening to a young infant's horrific attempt at playing an instrument, or it could even be seen as a blushing maiden's way of describing her first experience. To Hayato Issei, however, it meant that he had found himself in a situation that made him unable to swallow nor to stare at his own reflection in the mirror before seeing a word appear on his forehead, stamped, glowing, in all its Times New Roman glory. Idiot. He turned on the faucet, enjoying a rush of hot water which he supposed was one of the few benefits of a deluxe 5-star hotel, and he scooped the water and splashed it over his face numerous times, running his hands down from his forehead to his chin, before he glanced up once more to the mirror to see if the word had changed. It had. Big idiot. Though, not necessarily for the better. He sighed, taking in a deep, fulfilling breath of air before closing his eyes. Just like that, he was no longer in the extra-large spacious bathroom of the ludicrously extravagant hotel room he had booked. Instead, he stood once more on the vast open streets of London, his eyes watching, fixed, as the form of a blonde-haired girl approached him, and he stared at the brief interactions that followed. He tilted his fingers, and the scene rushed by as though someone had commanded time to fast forward, and he followed, watching as the blonde girl chased after him, a laughing mess. He paid close attention to the details, to the locations, his eyes immediately glancing towards the police officers in their bright green vests, towards the white patrol cars, towards the other people on the street and road. All of them had moved on, as though the laughing girl did not exist. She bumped into someone, and the figure had looked startled, collapsing on the ground and looking left and right, yet his gaze had never once landed on the blonde-haired girl. Issei exhaled, emptying his breath as he once more stood in the bathroom, staring at the steam that slowly wafted off the hot water that was pouring on the faucet. He shook his head, leaving the bathroom as he entered into the spacious, air-conditioned master bedroom. He paid no heed to the paintings strung on the walls nor to the soft and lush rug that cushioned his bare feet as he walked. Instead, he headed straight for his mobile phone placed on the king-sized bed. Tiki. Yes, Issei-sama. I'm an idiot. Really, nothing to say. No words of encouragement or firm denials. I can't argue with the truth, Issei-sama. Cheeky little. You know, I have half a mind to revert your character programming back to the willing servant type. You hated that character program. He hummed. True, subservience is good and all once in a while, but too much of it is just grating. Issei sighed as he leapt back on the bed, closing his eyes. The compounding events of the day slowly played, from the very beginning to the utmost end, with him booking a hotel room and deciding to call it a rest for now. Why do you believe you're an idiot, Issei-sama? Issei opened his eyes. You're one of the smartest men in the world, if not the smartest. If you're an idiot, what does that make everyone else? Issei shook his head. You know, one of the things I told myself when I was little was that I wouldn't become arrogant, or cocky, or overconfident, or act like a know-it-all. I mean, every single depiction of geniuses from movies to books to video games has them as cocky, rude assholes, and gives the excuse that because they're smart, they're allowed or expected to be mean. He rubbed his face. I mean, do you ever hear of any nice geniuses? Hey, this guy has a Nobel Prize in literature, and he also does some awesome party tricks. No, instead, we have the mean, blunt types that are fun to watch and see. But let's be honest, ordinary people wouldn't be capable of hanging around Sherlock Holmes without decking him in the face a couple of times. His rubbing of the face became more aggravated. They all have the same ridiculous hubris, pride, overconfidence, cockiness. It's always the one thing capable of taking them down because somehow, despite being smart, they're not smart enough to realize that being overconfident and cocky is very, very dumb. Ah, I see where you're going, Issei-sama. Issei chuckled. So, despite knowing all this, despite telling myself I wouldn't be that stupid, what exactly did I do today? Oh yeah, I discovered that God is real in a matter of 5 minutes simply by having you peruse through government websites. I underestimated a witch and believed that I was the one in control whereas she was humoring me the entire time. To be fair, Issei-sama, you couldn't have known about the supernatural existing. I could. He stressed. I could have discovered it any time. I have you, Kiki, and you can hack into anything. When I first created you, I should have had you hack all the systems of the governments of the world. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't I do that? Because the information is dangerous, Issei-sama. With that information, you could find out secrets and deals, remove or blackmail world leaders, impeach monarchs, cause global wide-scale wars. You would be painting a large target on your back for everyone in the world to see, and it would get you killed. Slow wafting silence drifted. They wouldn't be capable of killing me if I. You don't make weapons, Issei-sama. I'm just saying. You promised your mother, Issei-sama, with gods possibly being real. You don't make weapons. He raised his hands into the air silently. All right. I know I don't make weapons, but I don't need to. Everything can be used as a weapon in hindsight. A microwave, a stove, an oven, a television set, a stuffed doll, a baby, a fisticuff made of Legos. What did you say, Issei-sama? Oh, yeah, a fisticuff made of Legos still counts as me making weapons. No, before that. A stuffed doll. There was a genuine sigh emanating from the iPhone. Good night, Issei-sama. Issei chuckled, placing his hands at the back of his head slowly. Good night, Kiki. And, for what it's worth, Issei-sama, making wrong decisions or oversights once in a while doesn't mean you're an idiot, Kiki said. It means that you're only human. Issei couldn't stop the small pinpricks of a smile that formed at the corner of his lips, one which grew even as lyrics of a song began to play from the device. Thanks, Kiki. Anytime, Issei-sama. Issei allowed his eyes to close, his mind coming to a slow drawl as the song echoed in his mind. But I'm only human, after all. I'm only human, after all. Don't put your blame on me. Don't put your blame on me. London, elsewhere. He could not possibly be human. I truly do not wish you any harm. However, your continued resistance is quite tiring. Tired, exhausted pants and labored gasps for air echoed heavily amidst the otherwise serene night. Her palms were bruised even as she gripped the sword in her hand even harder. With the blade struck into the ground, she rested her entire body weight on it, as it was the only thing that was capable of letting her stand. Her knees were soft strands of noodles as they shook, her arms were anchors, and her lungs burned. It burned with a blazing fire that was almost indescribable. Needless to say, Irina Shidou was not having a good time. The man in front of her looked immaculate, with his circular glasses and his framed form, his polished suit and his attire glistering without a single blemish, a single fold or rumple, as though he had gone out for a fancy ball and had a legion of invisible butlers constantly ironing and polishing his outfit. In comparison, she looked like a woman who had gone for a swim fully clothed, partially drowned, only to immediately stumble through an alleyway and was assaulted by a legion of stray cats. While drunk, kindly hand over Excalibur Mimic. I would like to put this night behind us and carry on with my business. Irina couldn't help but scowl at him. This was insane. She knew that this man had the blood of the King Arthur flowing through his veins, and therefore he would be a highly competent swordsman, but to have defeated her so soundly, so easily. She stared at his hands, his empty hands, and a spurt of burning anger, like a geyser, flooded through her. He hadn't even drawn his sword. He was soundly defeating her, a trained swordswoman, with his bare hands, by dodging, weaving, and redirecting her own strikes so she cut herself. She kept cutting herself every damn time. This was aggravating because she was not a pushover. There were 7 billion people in the world, and out of which she was the one chosen and given the Excalibur Mimic. She was the one tasked with protecting an ancient and holy relic that was once part of the legendary sword held by arguably the greatest king in British history. She, Irina Shidou, was a genius exorcist of the church and a skilled warrior who ranked just slightly below the likes of Grisela Quarta, Dulio Gesualdo, and Vasco Strada. She wasn't given Excalibur Mimic out of nepotism. It was skill, pure, unbridled skill. Yet, despite the fact that she was amongst the list of top 20 exorcists in the world, she couldn't even graze the man that was in front of her. It is not your fault. The words snapped her back to reality, her eyes going wide once she felt the hand on her shoulder, a gesture which was supposed to be an attempt at comforting her, but instead absolutely terrified her as she had not even seen the man move, and as such, could only stagger backwards in utmost fright. You are an exorcist first and foremost, and a swordswoman second. The enemies you face are devils or creatures with a dark inclination. As such, you possess an array of defeating them using either the holy sword in your possession or various tools of exorcism. He walked forward, his form and posture as calm as ever. However, against an opponent who is neither ghost, nor devil, nor demon, nor poltergeist, your exorcism gear and abilities become ineffective, and as such, your combat ability is halved. She shuddered at the matter-of-fact manner in which he gave his observation. I do not mean to sound overly condescending, but your chances of defeating me at full combat effectiveness was ludicrously slim to begin with. But at half, he smiled, non-existent. She grit her teeth, ignoring the pain that shot through. You won't get away with this once the church finds out you're stealing the Excaliburs. You cannot steal what rightfully belongs to you, he said, easily, before shaking his head. But no matter, the church will not quite be finding out. Not just yet. She wanted to ask what he meant, only for her entire body to freeze up, as it dawned on her that she could not move. The feeling was as though dozens of constrictors had ensnared her, and was ensuring that it was impossible for her to make even the most minuscule of actions. That was when she noticed the blade in his hand, a sword with a long enough grip to make it appear two-handed and possessing a round pommel. There was a gold-colored crossguard that curved, and the entire blade hummed and sung with so much power that you would have to be blind not to see it. Her breath hitched in her throat at the recognition of the weapon. The most powerful Excalibur, the sword which granted the wielder the ability to control all things that they wished, to manipulate anything, be it matter, energy, mana, chakra, or even space and time. The holy sword of subjugation. Excalibur ruler. Now, he smiled. Forget. Trepidation. This was an emotion that Issei believed he had long since discarded. For what reason would he ever feel trepidation? He had stared down upon the bloody form of men on operating tables, his face a blank and bored facade even as his white gloves were stained red, and he paid no heed to the intricate nature of beating organs. He had stood on top of great waterfalls and listened to the roaring of the liquids as they threatened to consume him, and he had flipped nature the bird as he leapt forward, a bottle of cold Pepsi in hand. Wealth provided opportunities. Opportunities, in turn, provided rushes of danger and adrenaline that could not quite be compared to a normal lifestyle. As such, he had experienced and seen far too much to actually feel the familiar sensation of cold hands, of heated face, and of his heart pounding and pounding as the audibility blocked out all other noises, save for that of saliva welling in his mouth as he swallowed it in full, heavy gulps. His rational mind told him that there was no reason for the numerous, tiny, but heavily aggravating responses in his physiology which contributed to the general feeling of uncertainty and trepidation. However, his body, and strangely enough, his own instincts, heavily disagreed. We've reached the Shidu residence, Issei-sama. I know, Kiki. You have been sitting inside the car for the past 2 hours, Issei-sama. His lips twisted uncomfortably. Despite the tinted windows, he could make out Irina's house, just across the street from where his vehicle was parked, a comfortable-looking place that was neither too extravagant nor too parsimonious. It seemed like the type of place that Irina would live, the type of place she would enjoy. Still, he was glued to the chair. My initial scanner picking up elevated heart rates, increased perspiration and blood pressure. Are you nervous, Issei-sama? Yes, he said, not even pausing as he admitted the truth. Just give me a minute. Taking a deep breath of air, he steeled his nerves before craning his neck. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his rumpled clothes as he slipped his stolen iPhone into his pocket, and began a leisurely walk towards the door. His own pace, gait, and posture struck a chord within him. This is ridiculous. I'm just going to meet a friend, a childhood friend who I haven't seen in years. I'm not walking to my own funeral. Why in the world am I acting this way? Issei-sama. Jesus Christ, Kiki, I can feel my blood rushing through my veins and my palms look and feel like I dipped them in ice water. Why in the world is my heart even beating so hard? I know how it feels like when adrenaline is pumping through my system when I'm in danger, and this is not that feeling. He grit his teeth as Kiki stayed silent. I mean, sure, we haven't seen each other in years, and sure, it's kind of weird to travel halfway across the world just to meet a childhood friend that, as mentioned earlier, you haven't seen in years, but I'm rich, and if I had the money, why wouldn't I do it? Rich people do stupidly crazy things all the time, not that I would ever demean myself to be considered amongst the likes of the individuals who squander their wealth on trivialities. Issei, I blame Ka-chan for this. What was I thinking? I mean, the entire concept of traveling halfway around the world to meet someone and hook up. That woman will be the death of me, I swear it. And now, I have to do this ridiculous thing of meeting Irina. Wait, I don't really need to meet her, do I? Oh wait, I do, Ka-chan will ask, and I can't lie to her, damn it. Issei-sama, could it be that you actually like Irina? Issei froze. What? No, that I actually, somehow, someway possess some sort of affection for a childhood friend. That's preposterous. I mean, just because my body generates ludicrous amounts of dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin whenever I think about her or hear her name doesn't mean that I somehow. Issei-sama. He stopped. Issei took in a deep breath before placing his hand over his face. Yes, I do. As outwardly pathetic as it sounds, I have been harboring unresolved feelings for Irina since I was a child. There, happy. I don't think it's pathetic, Issei-sama. I think it's sweet. Issei's groaned into his hands. It is pathetic. Beyond pathetic. What I have is an infatuation with the idea of Irina, a friend and companion from long ago with somewhat similar interests. The Irina Shidu I'll meet will be that person, but at the same time, she won't. You don't know that, Issei-sama. He shook his head. No, I don't. And that's what terrifies me. He stood in front of the door for a few more seconds, calming his nerves slowly, certainly, before gathering them and forcing his finger to push against the doorbell. Coming. He fought the urge slowly within him to dash for the nearest hiding spot, even as he heard the clamor of footsteps that rapidly followed, and the agonizing sound of several locks clicking open. About time my order got here, I've been waiting. Oh, they. Perhaps the first thing he noticed was the sweet smell of mint that wafted into his nose from her. The aroma almost took a corporeal form, dancing and swaying like a swami would command a snake, until it coiled and shot through his nostrils in abundance. The next, he noted, was how her hair was let down into smooth, full strands which complemented her face, which complemented her eyes. For a full several seconds, Hayato Issei forgot to breathe. You're not the delivery guy. Her words immediately snapped him back to reality. Hey, Arena. Long time no see. You look, well. There was a slow stretching silence in which Issei realized that all of his compounded knowledge on everything related to and of human interaction, psychology and sociology, had somehow been emptied from his brain. He took some solace in the fact that she seemed just as flabbergasted as he was, and that would mean, at the very least, that she too had not expected his sudden arrival, and was also at a loss for words on how they would start catching up on so much lost time. I'm sorry, but do I know you? Just like that, his delusions shattered. The young teen in front of her looked to be her age, Irina noted, and as far as she could tell, he was an ordinary civilian. He had the strangest coffee-tinted eyes, and the weirdest of hairstyles, a mangled mess of a mop. His form was lithe, not lean or slender, nor was it heavy. But it looked as though his body had absorbed the exact amount of nutrients and done the exact amount of exercise necessary to fall into a category that could not be considered heavily athletic, nor could it be considered subpar. His clothes were of a standard that she had only seen worn by movie stars or celebrities in magazines, the hoodie and shoes possessing brand names that cost more than some people's salaries put together. Well, so he was a wealthy civilian by the make of his clothes, but she couldn't quite place who he was or why he was here. You're joking, right? She frowned at his expression, and even more so at his tone. My sense of humor isn't broken, so I think I know when I'm joking or not. The boy seemed to stare at her, and his eyebrows crinkled in a manner of annoyance. It's me, Issei. Hayato Issei. Japanese. The name brought her some surprise, because it had been years since she had met anyone with a Japanese name other than herself and her father. Ever since they had left Japan, she had grown accustomed to the curious looks whenever someone heard her last name, and the accompanying comments that followed. She had said in the barest of broken Japanese she could muster. Neither do you. He had replied just as quickly, in smooth and elegant Japanese, though she noted there as an annoyed tone there, one she wasn't quite understanding the root of. Well, I'm sorry, Issei. It's Issei, he hissed, causing her to narrow her eyebrows. Well, sorry for not correctly getting the name of the stranger at my door. Stranger. He sounded baffled. It's me. Hayato Issei. She slowly rubbed the side of her chin. You're not exactly ringing any bells. He gaped, strangely, as though the idea of her not remembering him was impossible. I lived at No. 45 Hajime Street in Kyoto. You were my next-door neighbor. We went to the same school. She scratched her head and laughed awkwardly. My dad and I moved a lot when I was younger. I'm sorry, but I was like 6 or 7 when I left Japan. I don't really remember much of it. I'm clumsy eating with chopsticks. I don't know how to write kanji anymore, and you just heard how bad my Japanese is. The boy's shoulders seemed to slump. So you don't remember me? She grimaced slightly. Was I supposed to? He shook his head, letting out a dry laugh. No, I suppose not. There was an awkward silence which permeated the air as she rubbed her shoulder, a sudden realization striking her. Did you travel all the way from Japan just to come and see me? Yes. The admission caught her off guard and didn't do anything to lighten the awkward air that had risen. Oh, I'm sorry. He waved her off. For what? It's not your fault. You, someone who had furthered onwards to newer chapters of your life. I can't blame you. This is mostly my fault, my mistake, my oversight. Delusions of grandeur mixed with childish optimism and far too much faith placed in anime about childhood friendships somehow transcending tests of time to become something else. He let out another dry laugh and smacked his face. What was I thinking? This isn't an anime where children make pinky promises to marry each other when they are little and somehow retain those memories throughout their years without discarding it to the side as the trivialities of naivety and innocence. Real people grow, they forget things, and they change. He took in a deep breath, stopping his rant. I apologize for what has probably been a very awkward encounter. I will take my leave now, and I wish you best of luck in future endeavors. She watched him turn around and leave, a strange nagging feeling in the back of her mind that she couldn't quite place. He was different from most 16-year-olds, and she could tell this because she was different from most 16-year-olds as well. She killed devils for God's sake. Literally. She was an exorcist and agent of the church, someone who went up against ghouls and poltergeists that would make the most terrifying horror movies look like the freaking Mickey Mouse Clubhouse in comparison. Her blade and hands were stained with blood. Sometimes it was the blood of the creatures of the night, and other times it was the blood of men and women foolish enough to incite or summon said creatures of the night. Normalcy was a term that did not quite fit into Irina Shido's vocabulary, and, quite frankly, she could tell at first sight that despite how completely civilian the boy in front of her looked, there was something abnormal about him. Could it be coincidence that a supposed childhood friend of hers had shown up just when the Excalibur fragments went missing? When her Excalibur mimic had simply vanished into the night? Just about the same time that people were having panic attacks and aneurysms over whether or not Harry Potter was a terrorist. She shook her head. She was probably overthinking things. This was just a boy who had traveled all the way across the world to meet a childhood friend, not some sort of terrorist. Still, he was a civilian. She knew the rules, and her father had told her the rules as well. It was best not to befriend civilians or be involved with them in any prolonged way, because it would ultimately lead to you having no choice but to either constantly lie to their faces, constantly modify their memories, or ultimately tell them about the existence of the supernatural. The latter, of course, was always a risk. Some of them would try to expose it globally, and others would either live forever in abject denial or become maniacal devoted worshippers. A few would be tempted to try Faustian-like deals with devils, and the rest would live in fear as to the reality of the burning lake of fire that awaited them, should their lives not conform to the religion. Hey, wait, Issei, right. He had stopped. Yes, she took in a deep breath. I think it's flattering that you still remember me, and that you flew all this way to meet me. I guess I was someone special to you. Yeah, you were. She winced slightly. I am sorry that I don't remember you, but I think it's for the best. I'm not the same person I was when I was younger, before she'd killed people, killed devils, exorcised demons, seen eldritch abominations. Issei simply laughed. Who is? Issei sat back into the BMW with a sigh. To the airport, Kiki. Call for my private jet, please. I don't feel like entering a commercial flight. Are you all right, Issei-sama? Do I sound not all right to you, Kiki? You told me please. You never tell me please. His eye twitched. Way to make me sound like an asshole, Kiki. Between you and Irina. Interesting conversation, wasn't it? Did not go at all like anything I expected. A complete and utter waste of my time this entire trip has been. Well, except of course for the whole God is real thing. You didn't ask Irina about the church or about God or angels, because she didn't remember me. If I started asking questions when she couldn't even be sure who I was, she would either think me a spy or an enemy. The silence continued, stretching on into a thick, syrupy thing. Damn, this is depressing. I don't need any erstwhile drama in my life. What I need right now is some fun and mindless chaos. Kiki, plot a course for Buckingham Palace. I think the Queen might remember me when I bring up her Excalibur-shaped pleasing tool. Issei-sama, what about your goal of finding more about the supernatural and destroying heaven and hell? Who says I can't do both? He said with a grin. Today, we mortify the Queen. Tomorrow, we mortify God. How do you mortify God? That, Kiki, is a very good question. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.